A netizen shared that as the Chinese Communist Party's 2 sessions were taking place in Beijing, she was trying to purchase some diapers, but was told by the seller that they cannot be shaped because the 2 sessions were still happening. A netizen recalled, "I had a similar experience when I was trying to purchase a nail clipper, also as the 2 sessions were going on in Beijing." A netizen replied, "No other regime in the world, except for the Chinese Communist Party, would claim that it remains loyal to its people, while at the same time being deeply fearful of its own people." A netizen shared a picture showing a group of Chinese monks and nuns holding a banner with the words, "Learning about the history of the Communist Party of China, feeling grateful to the CCP, listening to the words of the CCP, and following the directions of the CCP." A netizen that appears to be a former member of the religious community in China replied, saying that he was told by the local police department that he has been expelled from the Buddha school. But looking back, this netizen felt grateful that the Chinese government made this decision because he would feel shameful for being affiliated with the people at sea in this picture. A netizen shared a few comments from Hua Chunying at a press briefing in late March in response to a question on Biden's recent comments regarding US-China relations. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman commented that the goal of China has never been to surpass the United States, but to constantly surpass itself and become a better version of itself. A netizen shared that according to a leading Chinese professor, according to an article in the Epoch Times, titled "CCP Advisor Outlined Detailed Plan to Defeat US Including Manipulating Elections." The professor named Jin Canrong, his strategies, quote, "involve a range of malign actions to subvert the US while strengthening the Chinese communist regime. They include interfering in US elections, controlling the American market, cultivating global enemies to challenge the US, stealing American technology, expanding Chinese territory, and influencing international organizations." Jin is a professor and associate dean of the School of International Studies at Beijing's Renmin University of China. The plan was explained in detail in a July 2016 speech on Sino-US strategic philosophy delivered in Guangzhou City in southern China. In the meantime, Jin is also an advisor to the Organization Department as well as the United Front Work Department. According to the speech, the strategy to topple the US was composed of 2 broad components: weakening America through both internal and foreign sources, and strengthening the Chinese regime's economic, military, and diplomatic power. Using a metaphor of a company to illustrate the US-China dynamic, Jin likened the US to a company president and China to a vice president who wants the top job. He said the US is a middle-aged man who is good-looking, has strong capabilities and support from most employees. To replace it, we first need to create the conditions to make it easier for the US to make mistakes. Second, we should make it as busy as possible dealing with problems, to the extent that it will feel depressed and want to give up. Third, we should become intertwined with the US so that it can't attack us." End of quote. He also offered 4 practical tactics. Number 1, manipulating elections. Jin suggested that the CCP should interfere in US elections to bring pro-Beijing candidates to power. He said, quote, "The Chinese government wants to arrange Chinese investments in every single congressional district to control thousands of voters in each district. The voting rate in the United States is about 30%, which means around 200,000 residents in each congressional district vote for the representative in that district. Normally, the difference of votes between 2 candidates is 10,000 or less. If China has thousands of votes on hand, China will be the boss of the candidates. The best scenario is China can buy the United States and change the US House of Representatives into the second Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, which is the committee that oversees the CCP's rubber stamp legislature. And number 2, controlling the US market. He said, ramping up Chinese investments in the US is another way to exert influence in the country's political system, Jin said, noting that this tactic has the added benefit of enraging Chinese business people and the CCP. The investment opportunities in the US are relatively good. The US market is open, more open than the Japanese and European ones. He said, the Chinese regime wants Chinese business people to control the US market and also for them to develop their businesses in the country. To reach this goal, the Chinese regime had tried to negotiate with Washington for the US-China Bilateral Investment Treaty. The agreement was actively negotiated for the decade prior to 2017, but fell off the agenda during President Trump's administration. Number 3, fostering enemies of the US. Jin said that the CCP's strategic task was to make sure the US has not less than 4 enemies. For instance, before the Second World War, the US had 2 adversaries, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The Americans debated over and over about who is the real threat. If the US has 4 enemies, it will totally lose its direction. Analyzing the situation as of 2016, Jin concluded that the US only has 3 adversaries. Terrorism is definitely an enemy of the US. Russia looks like another one. Definitely, the US treats us as a competitor. It's not enough. Jin said that in the past few years, the CCP had tried to develop Brazil into an adversary of the US, but was unsuccessful because Brazil didn't want to be improved. He said the CCP had pumped a lot of investment into Brazil in the bid to guide its support on global issues, including taking stances against the US. Jin said the Chinese regime has given up on this approach and is trying to find a candidate to develop into a US adversary. A netizen reshared a tweet from Secretary Pompeo, which he said, "Strength deters bad guys, weakness begets war."
Child, we will take you in. Child, we will bring you home. You'll be a flower that sees the spring. Soon a dove flying high